Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen in to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB, every person has the right to share their personal perspective. We stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. We put our principles into action by speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered themselves to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board. We will focus on the impacted individual or population. We will condemn the conduct, not the person. And I'll ask Amy to review the meeting guidelines.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I quickly run through the guidelines. When you are speaking, please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, state the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the host, which includes staff and one of the co-chairs. Please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, signing up for public comment, asking for some assistance, or reminding folks that you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on yet. The raise hand function will primarily be used by the board. Co-hosts may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of the discussion. During the public comment periods, the public can raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, and facilitators when speaking. If desired, it's not required. Members of the public and others should leave videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're using a phone, you'll press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. As mentioned, the public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up by messaging us through the chat with PUB staff or raise your hand when the comment period opens up. Also, it will be available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. Back to you, Karen.
Thanks, Amy. This is Karen Williams speaking again, co-chair. So let's do a quick agenda review. This is what we have on our plate for the next hour and a half or so. We'll have our usual disclosure of communications, a public comment period, and take a quick look at several minutes that we have to approve today. We will then hear from Director Kennard, the stipends update related to the PUB code changes. And then very exciting, we'll hear from Robin from the subcommittee, the recruitment subcommittee, on their recommendations for new PUB members. And then we'll be hearing from Jessica Johnson, I am hoping I'm getting that right, on the community engagement strategy that the Portland Water Bureau is beginning, and hoping to have some coordination and collaboration with the PUB. And then at the very end, before announcements, we'll do a quick check-in on the Water Bureau's plans to resume collections, the additional answers and information they provided after their last update to the PUB on this topic, and the board, we can decide where we want to go next with that. And then as time permits, we have a long list of announcements and updates that we'll get to. I hope we can get to at least one or two of them, and we'll adjourn at 12:30. Thank you. So with that, are there any disclosures of communications from PUB members that you would like to get out on the record? And I should just acknowledge that we do indeed have quorum. So Heidi, yes, please go ahead, Heidi.
Yes, good morning. Heidi Bullock, she, her, voting pub member. I've been on a walking tour with some BES staff, and then just my usual biweekly meetings, all regarding Portland Harbor Superfund site.
Thank you, Heidi. Any other disclosures of communications from members of the board? Okay, seeing no more hands raised, let's move on to public comment. Do we have any members of the public who are interested in making a comment to the board today? Do we have any indication, Amy or Eliza, that anyone has signed up for public comment?
This is Amy, and I've not received any messages.
I have not either.
And I'm just scanning the participant list to see if I'm seeing any hands or indications. Dory Robinson and co-chair and Karen Spencer has raised her hand. I'm sorry, Karen, did I miss you on disclosures?
No,
or okay.
I was just a little slow in finding the button. I thought this might be a good time for me to just mention that I did attend the rate hearing yesterday and presented PUB's perspective, particularly including a discussion about our beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles. I did not get any questions from the council about that.
Thank you so much. Great timing to mention that now. I think it was on my list that I was actually supposed to draw some attention to that. So thank you, Karen, for doing that. All right, so we've completed disclosures and there was no public comment. So let's please take a look at the 4 sets of minutes, the April 6th pub meeting, 2 subcommittee meetings, and our May 4th pub meeting. And I'll wait just a few minutes or seconds to see if anyone has any corrections or additions or sees any omissions in those 4 sets of minutes that they would like addressed.
Karen, this is Tom Lipton. Can you see my hand raised?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. I was jotting down notes and wasn't looking at my screen, but yes, please go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I wanted to mention that in the May 4th minutes, there's a reference to a subject that I brought up, the Mid-County sumps, that somebody from BES was going to get back to us regarding whether what the policy is in selecting a sump versus selecting a green street facility. I just wanted to bring that up again, that if BES hasn't contacted anyone on the pub or staff, I'm still, at least I'm still interested to know if they, what the policy is or practice or.
Okay, thank you, Tom. But am I understanding there's not a correction to the minutes? You're just drawing attention to something that is in the minutes.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else about the 4 sets of minutes?
Karen,
Yes.
this is Amy Chomowitz, ex officio, and I just want to reply to Tom's comment. At the meeting, I did say that I would look into that, which I have done. I met with 2 people yesterday, and I'm just preparing notes. And I would think at the next meeting, the next pub meeting, I could respond to Tom's questions about that project.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks so much, Amy. We'll put that on our list for the end of the meeting when we're talking about what we want to make sure to leave time for at our next meeting. Okay, thank you. So hearing no corrections or additions that need to be made to the minutes, they are accepted. And I will now turn the floor over to Director Kennard for stipends update related to the pub code. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. Good morning, board members, and thank you for having me here today. For the record, my name is Jessica Kennard. I'm the city's budget director. So I'm here to provide an update on the desire of the pub to be able to provide stipends. And I'm going to begin, it's been a little while since I've been here, so I'll begin with a recap of the issue and provide an update on the events that have occurred related to stipend work in the past few months. So as you'll recall, we brought pub code updates to council in March, which included changes to the pub code that would allow for the provision of stipends. And this sparked a conversation amongst council around the desire and the need for a citywide policy related to stipends for advisory body volunteers. And we knew that this was a possibility because of the ongoing work that's been happening related to the need for a citywide policy in practice. Commissioners Mapps and Hardesty and the mayor all expressed interest in investigating this issue further, and I committed to doing more legwork with you with the pub and also those offices before returning for the code change amendments. In the time since that hearing, I've met twice with members of the Civic Life team working on the stipend policy. They've expressed to me many of the challenges that they've been confronted with and diving into what may seem like a straightforward issue, but in fact has several complex layers and issues that they're wrestling with. I realized in our first conversation that the pub could help address some of these challenges and help inform recommended practices for the entire city. And if the pub were, I suggested that if the pub were to be engaged as a partner with Civic Life in piloting stipends, that we could provide potentially some assistance that could benefit the city and benefit the policy overall. And the Civic Life team was very interested in that proposal. In particular, we discussed how the pub may serve as a test ground to understand more fully the implications and practice of the administrative requirements, as well as serve to provide valuable information gathering in relation to achieving the stated goals of the stipend policy that Civic Life is undertaking. So I've shared this idea of the pub potentially providing a pilot for stipend provision with both the mayor's office and with Commissioner Mapps's office, and both of those offices were definitely interested in pursuing this path forward, and it seemed like a win-win. I also discussed this idea with staff from Commissioner Hardesty's office, as Commissioner Hardesty is the commissioner in charge of Civic Life. And they are interested in understanding more about the proposal. Specifically, the commissioner is interested in understanding the details of the pilot that the pub's considering. And I let the staff know that we haven't gotten there yet. We're in the idea phase. The commissioner is just interested in sort of understanding and hearing from the pub more about what we would be thinking about with regards to the pilot. So I mentioned to the commissioner's office that I was coming back to you today, and that that she should stay tuned. The Commissioner Hardesty is also interested in knowing more about the pub's membership, having expressed a preference to have a pilot be with a board that reflects the diversity of the city. And we did respond with some information from that I think Amy had reached out to Dory, and basically the equity statement of the board and the work that the board is doing that's committed to equity and diversity. Again, I think the latest communication that I had with that office was to really focus on better defining and scoping out what a pilot could look like and providing that information for that office. And I think it's going to be very helpful for not just Commissioner Hardesty's office, but all council offices for the pub to develop and propose more specifics related to what the provision of stipends could look like and how that might help inform a recommended practice for the entire city. Amy, Eliza, and I all had a good conversation with Took Keo from Civic Life earlier this week, and Took expressed some of the goals and the challenges they're wrestling with. Particularly, Took expressed the desire and need to center volunteers in the process as well as achieve the goal of barrier removal to participation in city boards. And these goals are challenged by managing and adhering to our bureaucratic processes in the city, as well as some of the legal requirements that we're coming up against. So I came away from that conversation really encouraged, because I believe that pub membership can truly help civic life and help the city think through and propose potential solutions to these challenges to the benefit of the entire city. So Eliza and Amy are going to propose and solicit interest in potential next steps for some folks to maybe, if you all are interested in working together on this, and if there are a couple of members that might be interested in digging in a little deeper and helping sort of formulate what this pilot might look like. I think that would be really helpful. And again, I think I'm excited because I think we can get to a place where we're not just achieving the goals of the pub, but we are truly benefiting the entire city through your work and your dedication to this issue. So I'm available to answer questions, and just want to thank you again for your service and your patience as we work through this sort of the need to both address the citywide issue, as well as the desire and the urgency with the pub to try to be able to provide stipends. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, I think Eliza might have some next steps as well.
This is Eliza, and yeah, I would just add that I think as our very next step is to find out. So the next steps are sort of starting to draft some of those procedural processes that we would use to pilot, sort of the game plan for it. And that's going to be, it's going to intersect with policy a little bit, but it's going to be bureaucratic and procedural. And so I'm hoping there's like maybe 2 folks that want to work on that. And the timeline, what we're looking at, we're actually waiting on a short document from Civic Life where they identify the issues they found, and we'll want to review that because that will tie into, we'll want to make sure that our pilot is addressing those issues. And so we want that first. And so I think our timeline is we'll be working on this. We might have a short meeting soon, and then we would be working on it in the June, July, August timeframe. I see 2 hands raised. So Robin and Karen, are you volunteering or are you having questions?
I had a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification. I keep hearing the word pilot, and I was wondering what specifically makes this stipend ask a pilot. And the reason why I wanted to know that was because I know that there are other boards within the city of Portland that have stipends. And so at least from my perspective, it doesn't seem like we're necessarily starting anything. We're just building onto what others already have.
Yeah, and I think the use of the term pilot is twofold. Of course, I acknowledge and the council offices, I think, are aware, and Civic Life is certainly aware that other boards are offering stipends right now. When we came to the council, they were concerned with adding another group that would be offering stipends without more fully fleshing out the citywide policy. And so the use of the term pilot in this sense is geared at making it making a more explicit effort to partner with Civic Life and think about and address some of the challenges that they are wrestling with. So instead of going off and saying, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, having a little bit more of a two-way conversation and trying to take this opportunity to proactively help Civic Life develop and frame out what they're thinking as a citywide policy. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is it would be, and presumably, one time in nature with the hope of continuing, right? If we get it right and it ends up being, what informs and builds into a citywide policy, then certainly our hope and our desire is for this to be an ongoing practice. But calling it a pilot implies and means that it will be one time until we figure out exactly what the right way is of providing a stipend on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Karen Spencer, you had your hand up. Do you have a question or thought?
I think my question was answered. I wanted to hear more about what the challenges are, and it sounds like we're going to get a document about the challenges. So I'm good for now.
So Eliza will ask if there's folks who already know they want to volunteer to help. I think volunteers sort of look at those, develop the processes involved in the pilot. Raise your hand, send us an email, or let us know at the end of the meeting. And we would be bringing back, as we're making progress, we would obviously be bringing back reports to the rest of the board. I can't remember if I said that already, but yeah, it's just some people who are excited to dig into the process pieces of it.
Eliza, this is Karen, co-chair. Do I understand that the subcommittee or the group that's developing the procedures for this being called pilot, will that group involve people from the Civic Life Office as well?
We're going to figure that out as we go. I think it might very well, but our first step would probably just be to meet and talk amongst ourselves and sort of map some stuff out. Both Amy and I actually have a fair amount of background in dispersing funds to community members, so we'll be utilizing that, dispersing funds within the city to community members. And so we're coming in with a fair amount of knowledge of sort of the hard parameters we're working around. So I think we'll be able to move somewhat quickly. I'm hoping to develop a draft for folks to talk about.
Robin?
Yeah, just one more clarifying question. Is it to be understood that whatever stipend we do get would come out of the budget of the Civic Life? Is that why we need to work in tandem with them in regards to the challenges that they're facing?
No, so the budget will still come from, so the utility board is supported jointly by the budgets by funds from the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Water Bureau. And so funding would come out of the same pool of resource that we pool for the rest of the pub's operations. The partnership is really in service to sort of the greater desire and the overarching goal that I heard expressed by the council to align whatever the pub decides to do with our citywide practices and goals.
All right, well, thank you, Director Kennard, for that report back. Thanks, pub members, for questions and engagement ongoing on this issue. And I would just ask that folks that are interested in spending a little bit more time on some thinking with Eliza and Amy about what a stipend offering procedure might look like, to please send either, at the end of this meeting, let us know that you would like to participate on that, and or send an email to Eliza and Amy indicating your interest, and they will follow up with you for meeting times, of course. Okay, I'd like to next turn the floor over to Robin Castro for a report back and more importantly, a recommendation from the recruitment subcommittee.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief run through of the interviews that we had, the candidates that we chose, kind of their strengths and why as a subcommittee we chose them. But yeah, so I think we had 11 or so candidates. So we really had a large number of candidates to pull from. It was a strong candidate pool. We specifically ended up recommending candidates letter E and H for the two positions. And we also have selected a first alternative and a second alternative in case anyone decides not to join, but just wanted to highlight some of the strengths that we identified as a subcommittee, especially for the chosen candidates. So candidate E was unanimously voted upon that, yes, we wanted them to join PUB. They had a wide amount of volunteer experience and working within community organizations, especially sourced from within East County Rising, as well as Asian family centers. They were very much connected to vulnerable populations. They also had a really great grasp on financial challenges, as well as strongly had connections to our PUB values. And they also mentioned that utilities are a human right, and that really stuck with us. They also lived the experience of an impoverished life, and so they really have people power driven policies, and just their experience with human services, understanding what the community really seeks, and their educational and family history just made them a standout. And so we're very hopeful that they will accept our invitation. The second unanimously selected, I love how successfully the candidate pool actually went. Like, I love that we came to an agreement right away. But the second person selected, candidate H, they have strong technical experience as well as community connections. They were a standout because they spoke about active listening and just reconnecting and engaging with underserved communities, especially when those groups cannot be present at these meetings. They also happen to be a former small business owner and a geologist, so they're connected to multiple different backgrounds and different groups, as well as experience with the Portland Harbor Community Coalition. And they themselves have an intersectional identity and a background. They have a background in STEM, while also, I believe that they're about to obtain their master's in social work. And so it allows them to critically understand and review the sciences through a social lens. And so, and then we have two wonderful runner-ups, two wonderful alternatives. Candidate C had an amazing financial background, seemed to be a running theme that we liked. They were also well connected with business supply chain. They had a natural resources background, again, that lived experience. And they mentioned that water rights were really important for their child and just how generationally we have to look after our watershed. And final alternative, candidate J, was also a small business focus. And they had a lot of policy and law background and experience. So we were just really excited. I personally love being in the interview process, especially because I was on the complete opposite side of that Zoom call just 6 months ago. And it just sounded like, as a subcommittee, there was great consensus, and that we're really excited going to offer these people a position and hopefully put their names before City Council and have them appointed soon. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin, for that report back and recommendation. Are there any questions from PUB members for the Robin or other members of the subcommittee? Or any thanks for what sounds like exceptional and dedicated work? I would like to offer that. Thank you to the subcommittee. Gabriella.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you to everyone on the recruitment team. That sounds amazing. I had a question around when we would hear back from candidates or when they're expected to go up for City Council as well.
This is Eliza, and after I heard from the sorry, I'm a little bedraggled today. After the recruitment team made their decisions, I followed up with the candidates, the two that they were recommending for positions, as well as the alternates, to confirm continued interest. And I heard back from the folks, Kale and Alexander, that they continued to be interested. And I also let them know that our process is this long, protracted process, and the next step is the full board, and then it's the commissioners in charge and City Council. And so they would be filling seats that begin on July 1. And we would hope to get it before City Council in soon, in June, obviously, but maybe mid-June or so. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Eliza.
You're welcome.
And Tom Lipton.
Yes, I also want to offer my appreciation to the committee. Sounds like you did some good work. I'm curious about one thing, and that is, were there any applicants that had absolutely no background in this other than just being a citizen of Portland or a person of Portland? Were there any people that were just in that sort of category that didn't have technical experience or anything else? They just live here and were interested in participating.
I was part of the committee. I can partially speak to that. Specifically related to like a background in water sciences, environmental services, that type of thing. Yes, we had people who had that background. We also had people who were just really engaged in the community. They seemed like community organizers, community leaders, who didn't necessarily have water or utilities in their background, but they were definitely, you know, of the community and really community minded. And so we definitely had that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no further questions, then motion would be in order to approve the recommendations of the recruitment subcommittee and ask them to go forth and move their recommendations up the chain, presuming that the members that they, anyway, that the folks recruited do in fact accept. Tom.
It's Tom Lipton. I move that we do that. What you just said.
Is there a second?
I'll second. It's Karen Spencer.
Very good. Is there any discussion among pub members?
This is Eliza, and I want to make one clarifying. I'm guessing implicit in the motion is you're accepting the two they've recommended for the 2 open slots as well as their 2 alternates. Correct?
Yeah, since I made the motion, I would say that is correct. That's what my motion included.
And I can second that as well.
Okay, let's see. No, I'm not seeing hands for discussion among pub members. Is there any public comment on this topic, on this motion? Not seeing or hearing any indication that there is a public comment. We'll proceed to a vote. Karen Williams, co-chair, I vote yes.
Joy Robinson, co-chair, I vote yes.
Heidi Bullock, I vote yes.
This is Khalees Gade, voting member. I vote yes.
Karen Spencer, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Robin, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Tom Lipton, voting member. I vote yes.
Rob Martineau, I vote yes.
Gabby Saldana, voting yes.
And I believe that is all our voting members, correct? Yes, we have not missed anyone. So the motion passes. Again, thank you to the recruitment subcommittee for your great work. Very exciting. All right, our next item is a discussion item, and that is led by or introduced by Joanne. Sorry, I did in fact get your name wrong. Joanne Johnson, regarding the Water Bureau Community Engagement Strategy. So
please let us know what's up, Joanne.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for your time today, and thank you, Karen. So first, I just wanted to say I'm Joanne Johnson. I am the Accessibility Analyst at the Water Bureau, and I've been with the Water Bureau for about 3 months. I'm really excited to talk to you today about our community engagement strategy. We're really focusing on increasing the ways that we collaborate with community and building deeper partnerships. Our community engagement strategy is part of our implementation of our Water Bureau plan to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so to give us a quick update on what we've accomplished in the last year, I actually want to turn it over to Eric Pacheco, our Equity and Policy Team Manager, to give you a brief update on what we've accomplished, and then we'll dive into our community engagement strategy. Eric?
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Joanne. My name's Eric Pacheco. I use he, him, they pronouns, and I'm the Equity and Policy Manager at the Water Bureau. Last time I presented before this, not all of the current members were there, so I'm gonna just give you a little bit of a history of kind of how we got to now and where we're hoping to go. I started in my role exactly 2 years ago. It was May 2019. I was the first equity manager the bureaus had. At the time, most bureaus had equity plans that were developed in 2016, but those processes weren't particularly inclusive. And our equity plan at the time was really gone largely unutilized. And so we decided to go through the process of developing a more comprehensive equity plan, and we put together a task force of 20 employees who worked together for 6 months. And then we also did a pretty comprehensive literature review and met with professional water associations to get their expert opinion on some of the issues they're seeing nationwide for water utilities. And so as a result of that, we ended with an equity plan that has desired outcomes. It has stated goals, objectives, actions, and priorities. And it's separated into 2 large categories. One is about community service, and then the other one's on workplace culture. And within that, we have 5 goals. One is it mirrors our strategic plans of system reliability, community relationships, workforce and culture, organizational processes, and accountability and leadership. So we launched this plan in August of last year. And then over the fall, we started recruiting 2 new positions, one of them being Joanne's position, who is our accessibility analyst, and the other position is an equity and policy analyst. And so we hired these 2 positions in February, and we're really happy now we have a team of 4. Now we're really working hard on implementing the actions in the equity plan. And so one of the first things that we started last fall is we hired a contracting firm, or a consulting firm, excuse me, to do an equity audit at the Bureau and an employee engagement survey. And so we've been working with them for the past several months to come up with the questions and the format and how we're going to do that. And the engagement survey and audit will kick off on June 7th. So that's coming up here pretty soon, and it's going to be followed by several focus groups over the summer. And the idea is to have an independent audit that can provide the Bureau with recommendations on priorities and how do we create a more inclusive workforce and work environment. The other thing that we're doing is we have our equity committee. We're actually going with a new format of equity champions. Our equity committee is bureau-wide, And that's presented challenges to a lot of our staff in being able to participate meaningfully. So what we're doing is we're going to create smaller equity champion groups within each work group. We have 7 work groups at the Bureau. And the idea is that they will focus on advancing equity in the areas that are relevant to their work. And they're going to have paid time, 5% of their time, to work on advancing equity within the scope of their work group. We also have a community equity index that we're working with BES, and this is a data tool that's going to allow us to better embed equity into our community projects, whether it's construction or financial assistance or water efficiency and so on. And then lastly, but not least important, is our community engagement strategy. So at the Bureau, we've approached community engagement very ad hoc, very siloed, very team by team doing it. And so the idea, when Joanne got hired, she quickly realized, hey, we have no overarching framework for us when we talk about language access or disability access or really advancing equity vis-a-vis the community. We need a guiding framework that the entire Bureau can adhere to so that we can better coordinate together. So this strategy that Joanne's gonna seek your input on is really fundamental for us to achieve the goals in our equity plan. So I'll just pause there and see if you have any questions, and then pass it right back to Joanne.
Eric, this is Karen
Yeah.
Williams. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I think it's appropriate to, oh, yep, there's Karen Spencer has a question before we go back to Joanne.
Hopefully this is the appropriate time. I just wanted to say how delighted I am to see Joanne. I was part of the interview process, so and I'm delighted by the work, Eric, that you have done. And I would be really excited to hear more about the equity efforts after the audit. Maybe the Water Bureau and BES can do a joint presentation about equity after the audit is done. So I didn't mean to interrupt too early, but wanted to say how delighted I am by these efforts.
Thanks, Karen.
Great. Are there any other questions?
Doesn't look like it, Joanne, right off the bat.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Eric. So as Eric shared, our community engagement strategy is just one part of our overarching efforts to advance equity in the Bureau. And one of the things that I'm doing is I've gone around and interviewed a lot of different staff and a lot of different work groups in the Bureau about their ideas to advance equity. And I'm spending May and June talking with different community groups about their ways to advance equity. And so when I'm talking to you today, I'm hoping that you can wear 2 hats for me. One hat is pub advisory member and your ideas, thoughts, reflections, experiences from that. And another hat is a person who lives in Portland or a person who works in Portland or a person who cares about Portland. So yourselves as a community member. And I'm asking 2 very broad questions today, and that's on purpose. I'm much more interested in hearing what you want to share now that you know that we're looking to develop a strategy and identify mechanisms that will help us to build deeper community partnerships and do things more consistently across the Bureau. Everyone knows that now. I'm really interested in hearing, what do you need as a pub member and as a community member to not only build deeper relationships with the Bureau, but feel like your needs are met by the Water Bureau in the ways that you're hoping for? So I'm going to say that one more time, and then I will pause for an awkwardly long time, hoping, fiercely hoping that one of you will jump in. My question is, for your families, for your communities, for your role in pub, what do you need from the Water Bureau to build deeper partnerships, to feel like your needs are met? Yeah, Tom Lipton.
Hi, yeah. Oh, my video is kind of weird, isn't it? Anyway, that's not important. So I have a question that struck me.
Yeah.
So you're going to do this this work, and I'm wondering a couple things. One is the assumption that the current methodology you use for charging for water is the assumption that that is about the best you can come up with? In other words, you charge water based on how much water is used, and then in residential cases, you give a not a discount, but you give a compensation for the fact that different seasons people use different amount of water. And so I'm asking that because when I think of the different types of projects the Water Bureau has, and I'm especially thinking about the Willamette Crossing. So there are projects that the Bureau does to accommodate others in the city. And some of those projects cost a lot of money compared to other parts of the city. So for instance, the east side of Portland is closer to the water sources, actually, both the wells and Bull Run. And the west side is further away, i.e. the fact that we're going to have this new Willamette Crossing to get water over there. So there's an expense that's associated actually with where people live. And I don't know how this relates exactly to equity, but I think it does.
Yeah.
So theoretically, just let me throw this out there. So theoretically, the assumption might be that, well, people on the west side, it costs the Water Bureau more money to get water to the west side. And so if you live on the west side, you're actually costing more. If you live on the east side, you're costing less, but yet everybody gets the same rate. So is that something that you will take into consideration in your work? Or is it a done deal that the method that's currently used is the method that's going forward? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your question and for all that context. I will share that I am just, and I mean just, beginning to understand and learn how our rates are structured and how people are impacted or disparately impacted by our rates. What I'm hearing from you, Tom, as it relates to our community engagement strategy is that it is critically important to you as both a pub member and a community member that we engage community in conversation about any continuing or changing of our rate structure. And I just want to check in that that's a correct implication, and then I will turn it over to Eric if he wants to add anything.
Yes, I think that's correct. What I was
okay.
trying to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to add that we are actually, in our strategic plan, we have a strategy that's planned for the next year or so that is to conduct a rate structure study to better understand, is this the most equitable way for us to be charging customers? Our rates are flat. That means everyone pays the same rate. And so usually when we think of, say, our financial assistance programs, the people that are most heavily impacted by that are the people that are just right below or above that threshold, right? The people that make just too much income but don't qualify for financial assistance, right? They are bearing the biggest burden because it's a flat rate regardless of how much you make or where you live or all of those things. And so there are different ways that different utilities worldwide structure their rates to make them more fair and equitable. And that's part of what's going to be in that study. I can also tell you that just recently we prepared a memo for Commissioner Maps, who asked us to start looking deeper into affordability, particularly because our rates are going up at a high rate because of the filtration plant that we're building. So affordability is ever present in our minds, and we're working hard to make sure our water remains affordable for all Portlanders.
Thank you. Robin and Karen, I see both of you. I didn't notice who raised their hand first.
Karen was first.
Oh, Karen, you're up.
You asked about needs, and something that came to mind, or two things came to mind. One is, as far as community engagement goes, and something that I'm particularly interested in is kind of the quiet voices, not so much the folks who are the what I would call the extroverts who are going to stand up. It's really trying to find those quiet voices. And then the second piece is something that has stuck with me since being on the SPUR committee last summer. And what someone said was, they were pretty reticent to do the grant because they felt that the government gives with one hand and takes away with the other hand, right? And addressing that reticence about government involvement and coming with it, I guess, with a sense of humility and a recognition that all past actions may not have been great, I think would be fairly significant.
Acknowledging history and past actions. Thank you so much. Robin.
Yeah, so when I think about deeper needs being, building deeper needs that need to be met through equity, I definitely, personally and within my position on the board, I would really like the Bureau to look into aligning with the philosophy that water is a human right and objectively stating it within their constitution or founding documents, their bylaws. And I know that we very much preach affordable water, but that doesn't necessarily mean access to that water. And if we can align ourselves with the belief that water is a human right, then we should align our actions and our principles with that as well. And I think that would lead to greater equity as well.
Thank you. Who else has thoughts or questions? Brian, I don't see everyone's hands here, but I do see you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't trying to raise my hand. I was just applauding Robin's comments.
That's
Sorry.
clapping. Yes, yes. Anyone else have thoughts on what you, or as a community member or a pub member, need? And I can offer a more specific question if that's helpful. So, Tom, did you have a comment or a question or?
I have sort of like a request. I really appreciate what Robin just said, but I'm not sure I fully understand it, and I don't want to take time right now, but I think if you follow up on that, or maybe however, I want to understand that better than I currently do at the moment, and it sounds important. So if you guys would be working on that, I guess if you would can acknowledge that would be a part of what you're working on, that would be great.
If I can acknowledge, or if Robin can acknowledge, I just want to make sure I understand.
She brought it up, and now I'm wondering, are you going to put it on your list of things that you address in your work?
I've absolutely got it in my notes as part of what people want to incorporate into the strategy. I can't speak on behalf of the Bureau about how the Bureau is going to address its work in the future, but this engagement strategy is going to go before our entire leadership team, and it will include broad themes that came up and specific comments that came up, like Robin's. That help?
This is Robin. Sorry, this is Robin again. I just wanted to clarify for Tom. If I didn't say it when I mentioned that that the Water Bureau should view water as a human right, I explicitly wanted that linked to the elimination of cutting off services to community members as the action to that stated value.
Thank you. And I will share that there is an action in our current equity plan that looks at that is a study to look at what it costs and what we gain by shutting off water. So I have a feeling, Robin, that there are many others in the Bureau that are thinking along those same lines. Thanks. So how about a more specific question? And if you think of a broader need, always feel free to share it. But thinking more specifically, are there other topics besides water shutoffs and big projects and the cost of water? Besides the cost, are there other times or places that you think the Water Bureau should be reaching out to you as a PUB member or a community member? Like, when would you like to hear from us?
This is Karen Williams, co-chair, and I have a thought on that.
Yeah.
I would say quality is as important as quantity and cost, or maybe they're not, they're not directly equivalent, but quality is important. Maybe I'll just state that. So, I would find it helpful as a community member and a PUB member for there to be, timely communications, updates, interesting, points of interest that I would say beyond the annual water quality report, which is certainly vitally important, and the community needs to have that information and understand that information. But more frequent communications about water quality and what influences that, how that's reflected, what the let's see, the sort of the outcomes and consequences of differing levels of water quality. I think that would be something, just as a community member, I would like more information about.
Thank you very much. If I could ask a clarifying question, recognizing that we're not setting anything in stone today, what would more frequent or more timely look like for you? Just you specifically.
Yeah, I would say, maybe a couple times a year or 3 times a year. I'm thinking of something like that, and it wouldn't necessarily, so more than annual, less than quarterly, I mean, it doesn't have to be a regimented, oh, it's time for us to report out on water quality. I mean, that's what the water quality report does. Sure. But yeah, I mean, I perhaps seasonally, there might be water quality issues that sort of are on people's minds as the seasons change, as stormwater and runoff and erosion becomes a bigger issue. And then maybe in the summer, it's more about, how am I affecting water quality by, I don't know, watering my lawn? Am I reducing the quantity, and that affects quality? So maybe seasonally is sort of a ballpark sort of idea about how frequently to communicate about water quality.
Okay, thank you. That helps so much. Gabriella?
Yeah. Sorry, I got thrown off by my hand still being raised. So I was like, am I talking? Yeah, I think first of all, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the statements thus far, especially Robin's. And I think that just makes me think around how, as we're moving forward in time, we're going to have to grapple with the effects of climate change. I mean, we already are and have been. And I think that that's something that I'm particularly really scared about, is that as we're coming closer to summer, closer to fire season, like what are we expecting to see? And so I think as the Water Bureau, it's important to have communication when those kind of things happened, because there's possibilities that, water needs to be used for other places. And I think what we do a lot, especially when it comes to resources and anything around climate change, is that we put a lot of emphasis on the individual. And even though I think individuals do have a lot of control about like how much water they're using, it also has to go back to the overall system and what, the Water Bureau in particular is doing to, make sure that water usage is used in, a smart way, or in a way that, protects resources or conserves them as much as we're able to.
Yes.
So I think that's super important, as much as we're putting emphasis on like, not watering your lawn and et cetera, like individual actions. And also just, I think if the Water Bureau and other public utilities had a stronger stance on the privatization of water and standing stronger against that, there is a lot of conversations around privatizing in Eastern Oregon, Nestle in particular. And I think, as one of the bigger water bureaus in the state, I think it's important for, I think it would be important to stand more and, in favor of communities and having that access. So, having that stronger stance and what is the Water Bureau doing to work so that community can have that equitable access to water, not just here, in the Portland area, but, all over the state. And even though the Water Bureau can't necessarily control what other places do, I think having some kind of influence and recognizing that influence is important. Sorry, I feel like I just went on a tangent, but thank you all for staying with me.
This is great. Thank you so much, Gabriella. I saw Robin and then Brian. And if I ever call on people in the wrong order, just let me know.
I've already spoken a few times, so if Brian would go first, I can go.
Sure thing.
Robin, I'd like you to go first, please, just because you're a voting member, especially, please.
All right, I appreciate that. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think that this goes along with both questions, but more specifically about connecting to the deeper needs of the community. I would be remiss as a pub member who's been on this board for about 6 months if I didn't address the fact that we rarely have community input at our public meetings, but when we do, they are overwhelmingly discussing about the fear of high levels of lead in our water. And the fact that it doesn't seem like the Bureau is addressing that to the extent that the community seems that it's necessary for the, yes, it's a low percentage of households that are affected, but the lead that is tested is like a high enough level essentially that it does cause fear. And I've noticed as a pub member and just listening to the community members that come for public comment that they don't necessarily feel that the Water Bureau is centralizing the reducing lead within our water and how critical it is as a public health issue.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Robin, can I ask a follow-up question on that? How recent have you been hearing about these things? I'm just wondering because, we are in the midst of building, as you probably are aware of, a corrosion treatment plant that's going to go online next year, precisely to address that issue. And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, this is a communications issue, is this a perception issue? Like, what are you hearing?
Well, I've been on this board as an elected member since January of this year. So this is just specifically through this same meeting mechanism in the past 6 months. I'm not sure if it's a lack of communication, but I do know that it's kind of like an earworm in my head, and I follow the Bureau updates. I know that the Water Bureau gives, I just got an email about how there's like a 10 blocks worth of pipes that are going to be fixed next year. And so I noticed that lead isn't necessarily always addressed specifically in those newsletters, even if there is, it sounds like this greater mechanism that is in the works to address it. It just might not be as forward facing, or the community might not be able to understand how the behind the scenes plan connects directly to their troubles or their concerns.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Ryan, you're up.
Hi, Brian Laurent, ex officio from BES. I have a couple questions that are related to what Gabby talked about, and then also Robin. and that's that in that some of the risks that people experience with respect to their water are not within the realm of anything that the Water Bureau can control. And what I mean by that is, like, I just bought an old house that, you know, it's 100 years old, and I don't trust the plumbing. You can hear my electrician banging away downstairs. That so like a lot of people experience all that risk within, you know, on their side of the curve. And the way that housing works is that many people don't even have the resources or even the authority to do anything to the place they live, right? So like, so in attacking the lead problem, it's like this distributed problem where it's actually outside of your authority in many respects. However, like other folks are talking about, like with water having a leadership role potential, my question is sort of like, if we think of concentric circles of this particular strategy and reaching out to the bureaus that have a closer or further relationship, or a process that has a closer or further relationship, my first question is, how is this strategy coordinated with anything else that's happening at BES? And what are the priorities around that? And some examples would be like, do we want people to better understand the differences between the bureaus and the services that they provide? Or do we want to be promoting something that's more coherent, and because they experience everything as one thing, because they get one bill, so they think that BES is the Water Bureau, right? So like, is that an important thing to address amongst our customers? And then beyond that coordination with BES in the realm of both homelessness and also and then this housing situation, like those are two other sort of forums for both bureaus to participate, but in a right-sized way, where, you know, they're not being asked to take the lead on fixing a housing problem that causes lead, or fixing a homeless problem that occurs on Water Bureau properties, right? However, both bureaus do have roles to play in participating in the citywide efforts around those things. And so then my question would be, what's the relationship of this plan to those things as well? Thanks.
Thank you. And before I try to address that, I just want to check in on time. Karen or Eliza, I think we were scheduled to go until 12:10. Do I have time to go a little longer, or no?
So yeah, 12:10 we were going to start wrapping up, and then 12:15 we'll move to other business and announcements. So
Okay.
however you'd like to use that, I guess 7 or 8 minutes, Joanne, please do.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. So Brian, what I can share about the community engagement strategy and how it relates to the work happening in other bureaus is that one thing I want to offer is that as a city staff, I always try to collaborate and align with the work other bureaus are doing. And I've been charged with developing a community engagement strategy that identifies ways that the Water Bureau can deepen our relationships with communities. And so I have talked with staff in BES about what they're doing to both learn from them and share information with them. We aren't formally coordinating because I do want to focus on making sure that the ways that we talk about working with community work with the Water Bureau, because that's the scope I've been charged with. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so they're part of informing the plan. We're just not officially collaborating on our strategy in that way.
Sure. Okay, and then it makes sense that the other efforts that I described are ongoing, you know, with people at Water. Just it's not your responsibility to deal with those aspects.
Yes, yes. And this strategy will help us to understand the different ways that we can better build deeper partnerships so that we can address some of those bigger issues with community, and in ways that community finds life-giving and respectful and honoring, instead of, oh, the government's gone and decided something again.
Okay, awesome. And I guess, well, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Tom Lipton. I'm sorry, I don't know how you want to be addressed. Please let me know if you'd prefer Mr. Lipton or Tom or both.
Just call me Tom.
Okay.
Okay, so, well, and since the issue of water quality has come up, I can't help but throw in my hat about my, not only my pub concern, but my personal concern about the issue of the cryptosporidium that is causing us, or the catalyst that's brought us to spending, I don't know, more than $500 million to solve this particular water quality problem. And so what worries me is that, how do I say it? What worries me is that we have this problem that could be very serious if it gets out of hand. So how often does the Water Bureau test for the cryptosporidium? And at what point, how far are we away from the trigger point that would cause us to have to start taking drastic measures such as boiling our water? So are we down at 1 or 2 parts per million and we have to be at 200 parts per million? Or are we, just more information about that issue?
Sure.
And I think a heads up, since it's going to be 7 years before or 6 years before the facility goes online, if we're lucky, everything goes right. If we have this hit that is beyond what's safe, I don't think anybody in the city is thinking, well, what do I do and how do I address this? And I get the impression that maybe the water bill doesn't want to scare everyone, but you've scared me so far. So anyway, I just think that more attention needs to be given to that and more strategy about how to help the public and not keep it from the public until the last minute and say, oh God, and hopefully it won't happen. Hopefully we'll be online and we'll be up and running and everything else. One last point about water quality is I did sign up for a water quality test kit from the Bureau. So I tested the lead in my water in my home, and the lead was 0.11. And the level, the supposed, there's different levels, but the one I guess the Water Bureau is going by is 15 parts per something. And mine was 0.11. So it's extremely clean as it relates to lead.
Sure.
And I think that's another thing. I know there's a lead issue, but Water Bureau's water is really clean. It's when it gets into the system or old remnants from when the Water Bureau had, lead pipes and things like that. So I think it's a hard issue, but there's a lot of clean water that the Water Bureau has. I don't know how to say it. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's enough of me. I'm done.
No, thank you very much. I do want to offer a little bit of information I know, and anyone who knows more, please feel free to jump in. I believe we test for cryptosporidium a few times a week, and I know that responding to heightened levels of cryptosporidium is part of the Bureau's emergency plan. So I hear you that the Bureau needs to do a better job of communicating with the public that we have one, and that this is what it is, and this is what might happen. But I do want you to know that the Bureau is thinking very hard about how close we are to a boil water notice, and if one were to happen, what would we do? Like, we have a plan for that. And it's my understanding, and again, I don't work in water quality, but it's my understanding that we're pretty far at all times from a boil water notice. And I think the last one was something like 2006 or 8. I'm going to take a breath for someone else to add any information that they would like. Okay, hearing none, I just want to thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. I want you to know that I am getting community input through May and June, and then in July, I hope to have a draft of our community engagement strategy. At that time, I'll send it to Eliza. And so if you all want the chance to look at it and provide additional feedback, please know that I enthusiastically welcome that. Also know that if you have questions for me or comments you didn't think of, you're absolutely, I would love it if you'd send those to Eliza, and she'll make sure that I get those. And Rob, I see you. Hi.
Rob?
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I'm hearing a lot of conflict in the feedback, and I really appreciate the conversation and how that's occurring. I'm a a little concerned that maybe this is outside of how we should be engaging. What I'm hearing you say is, how do you want the Bureau to communicate, with the utility board? And although a lot of what's been said are values, important values, and thoughtful ideas, in some ways I feel like it's more appropriate that we would direct some of that as a board towards council. So I'm not sure that I'm providing you feedback, Joanne, as much as thoughts for the board. Some of the things that we talk about are certainly in direct conflict. If we're going to perhaps not do shutoffs, but then have geographical rate assessments, at some point, no assessments are necessary if there's no need to pay or have a bill that is, if there's no penalty for not paying. And then I guess if we took it one step further, if we have housing providers and people that are building, if as this right, maybe there's a different provisioning process. But again, as a board, that's probably something we should be taking through council. I'm not sure that this is maybe the right venue when we look at this type of city policy. And I really want us to be able to express that need, have that connection of how do we want to be communicated with, so that we can take those communications that are so important about water as a right, or perhaps a geographical rate assessment based on your proximity to the source. Those may be a council directive or advice rather than the Bureau in how they communicate to us. So just for consideration, I'd like our board to think of those things. And as someone who has spent 22 years providing clean, safe drinking water, I absolutely want to continue to do that. So I do want to make sure that everyone has access, and I just appreciate your role as in accessibility, Joanne. So thank you. And that's what I had.
Yeah, no, that was it. Thank you so much. Thanks for those closing words, Rob. I will stay on the meeting for a few minutes in case anyone needs to catch me. Otherwise, thanks so much for your time and have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you so much, Joanne. This is Karen Williams. And yeah, folks, please do take advantage of the offer that Joanne is accepting feedback and ideas from us as pub members, as well as community members in both of our roles. So please, through the month of June, or as soon as you can, send those ideas and questions to Eliza. And looks like we can look forward to seeing a draft of the community engagement strategy in July. So thank you, Joanne. All right, we're going to do a quick touch next on the Portland Water Bureau plans to resume collections topic area. Just to acknowledge that the Water Bureau has provided additional written follow-up information that was based on their April 6th presentation and the Q&A that ensued. So really what I would just like to ask the pub members today is, do you believe our next steps on this should be? And a couple things I'd ask you to think about. When do you want the next update from the Bureau? Are there any particular steps that we should be taking as a pub? And yeah, to those two questions, what do you all have to say about that? When do we want our next update, and are there any immediate next steps for us to take as a board on this topic? Are you all thinking, or are you, there we go. My fellow co-chair, Dory.
Hi, Karen. First, I'd like to thank Joanne and Eric for joining us today and providing us a glimpse into what their strategic plan is for community engagement and racial equity at their respective bureaus. I think it would be to the Water Bureau's benefit and to PUB to have Joanne, if she has capacity, be present at when PUB does our larger community meeting, and to ask those same questions to Portlanders and to expand the information that she receives to include not just PUB, but who PUB represents and how we're trying to, get to know them. So that is my, I think it could be to the board's benefit to extend an invitation to Joanne to be present there. But I want to hear feedback on the board from the board first on if that's even a good idea. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Dory. So other hands raised, forgive me for maybe jumping too fast to our next topic there. Folks with hands raised, do you want to engage in the conversation about having Joanne come to our community meeting, or did you have your hands raised to respond to next steps on the collections item? Let me just check in. Karen Spencer?
I was responding on the collections, but I can hold off.
I was just gonna make a quick response to what Dory just.
Okay, Robin, why don't you go ahead then, and then we'll go back to the collections item.
Yeah, I think I would be in support of Joanne joining. I do want to ask a clarifying question. It's Mingus, correct? Our commissioner, who is the utilities commissioner. Are they already invited to this event, and that's why we're not mentioning them specifically, or are they not invited currently, and we're asking Joanne to join us instead?
No. This is me ruining everything once again. There is not an invite or a not invite list at all. It's a wise and well thought out idea to invite Commissioner Maps if he would have capacity. And I am in no way in charge of who's on the invite list or who isn't. So if other people on the board as well, in addition to Robin, if there are people who you think would really benefit being present, please communicate that to Amy and Eliza, and she'll share it with myself and Karen, or most likely she'll just share it with the future co-chairs, because I won't be here at the end of June. So sorry, Robin, for causing that confusion, and sorry, Karen, for derailing the topic. Let's get back on subject.
No problem at all. Thanks for that thought.
This is Eliza, and I can't raise my hand because I'm a co-host. So we got a comment from the community member that I wanted to make sure that Joanne, who it looks like she's still here, would get, which is the comment from the community member is, what is the community engagement strategy with relation to small businesses?
Good comment and good question.
Okay, thanks, Eliza. And thank you to the community member for submitting that question. Okay, so now let us, if with the permission of the board, we'll go back to thoughts on next steps for the Bureau plans to resume collections. And I believe Karen Spencer had a thought on that.
So given the, I think, sort of thoughts that have been expressed today about collections, I think it might be useful for the board to have a conversation about that, and maybe more broadly about access to waters being a human right, because I kind of want to balance that with some of the follow-up that we received where bills are much higher, and we're hearing from folks that they're not going to pay the bill till they absolutely have to and are kind of forced to do so. So we're kind of combating our lesser instincts as human beings in that regard. So I think we should speak sooner than later. And the question I have in my back of my mind is, should we have a specific proposal from the Water Bureau BES with regard to collections to have that conversation, or can we have that in the absence of it?
Okay. So Karen, can I just reflect back and make sure that I understood your suggestion, recommendation, and question? Are you thinking that full discussion with a sort of a particular outcome that we're looking for at a board meeting? Is that kind of the forum that you're recommending that we engage further in this topic?
I haven't even gotten that far. And maybe this is better for a subcommittee to think about water as having access as a human right and coming up with a proposal for the full board to think about. I just don't know, and I have thoughts, but I don't have enough information to actually feel like I could even discuss the topic at this point.
Fair point. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was at least capturing accurately what your recommendations were. So,
And thank you for attempting, because I know that I was completely vague and inaccurate.
no, no, you were absolutely not either of those things. I just, I was kind of, I was just thinking about, okay, so where do we continue that? And that's why I ask about, is that a full board? Is that, subcommittee? And maybe it is too soon for us to jump to those specifics at this point. How about let's take maybe a simpler topic. What do board members think is a good time for the Bureau to come back to us with an update, or when things change? We just, again, when we have a lot of potential things on our agenda and topics to wrestle with over the next few months. So do folks have thoughts at this point about when would seem like a right time to have the next update from the Bureau? Tom?
I would think that giving them a chance to put the strategy in motion that they talked about with us, and to see how that goes without taking any drastic action toward any particular person that is unable to pay for whatever the reasons are, and drastic meaning no shutoffs, and do it for a couple months, and then come back to us and tell us how many people are out there in the various categories, the people that just say, oh, I'm not going to pay, blah, 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 and the people that are really in dire straits, the people that just can't do it because of circumstances beyond their control, or however you want to phrase it. So I would like to give the Water Bureau a couple months to see how their strategy works, and then let us help look at that with them, and then see, well, how do we address these other situations that people have. And I say that thinking I'm not opposed to the idea of forgiving bills. I mean, I know Water Bureau has said that they can't do that, but I think there's a way to talk about that and see if that could be done, if we all agree to it, of course. I'm not saying we're agreeing to it, but I'm just saying I'm open to the whole range of possibilities. But starting with letting the Water Bureau, not that we're letting them, we don't have that authority, but I mean, just, they proceed, and we see what happens, and then take it from there.
Rob?
Hi. So I think that I would be happy to hear back on this subject at the point that it is causing adjustments, that the shortfalls would be causing adjustments in the budget, probably closer to the Bureau's preparation for submission during the fall bump. Might be a good opportunity. If we're looking at our scope as water and sewer rate setting, that certainly those lost revenues are going to affect that. Those effects of collection, I think, are really what we should drill down on. So at the point, whether that's in this year's budget cycle or the fall bump or next year's spring bump, I think that would be the appropriate time to hear back on why those adjustments are being made, and again, hear more on the collections side of things. With regards to options, I would leave that to the experts in billing and collections, And if forgiveness is on the table, I think that probably comes from council. That's probably more of a charter adjustment, but it's also something that we could, I suppose, weigh in on were that something council was willing to take up. But I think the Bureau would probably have a lot more information on charter and code with regards to the options that they have. My understanding is that they already exercise the options that they do have under charter. So thank you.
And I know we do need to wrap up and adjourn, but let me just put one more thought out there for folks and just ask if this is acceptable to the board. If we were to hear back from the Bureau somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 2 months to 4 months, it's sounding like end of summer or fall, when fall budget adjustments may be necessary, would the board then at that time, would that be a more appropriate time for us to, as a board, have a discussion about, okay, what's our role in this? Do we want to formalize a recommendation or form a subcommittee to drill a bit deeper, and have something on the record about what how we recommend that the Bureau proceed? Does timing for that discussion in, let's say 2 to 4 months, does that sound about right to the board? Got a thumbs up and a couple thumbs up. Okay. Okay, that sounds great. Thanks. All right, well, we're at our meeting end. Not surprising, the next few items on the list here, maybe we could switch slide to the updates and announcements we were going to do if there was time, just to let people know. And Eliza, would you like to, I know you sent an email about this, but
it got confusing because there was so much changing. So I just want to make sure people understood that it's been postponed till September. If you haven't already told me that you're interested and you are interested, please do let me know by the end of day today. But I'm sure there'll be another opportunity. And then also, if you're interested in the co-chair position, please send an email or text or something by this Saturday. That's it.
All right. Thanks so much, Eliza. So foreshadowing to our next meeting, we'll be able to hear back on some of these items that we didn't get to today, perhaps engage in a topic that for discussion that has been mentioned a few times at the board, but we haven't really had the time to drill into, and that is our presence, if any, on social media and how we might develop that in our efforts to engage more strongly with our community. So with that, unless there is any other pressing business that needs to be on the record for this meeting, I will call the meeting adjourned. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Tom, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it. Let's just go. We're done.
Do you have something you want to put on the agenda for the next meeting, Tom?
I just want to keep I don't know if it'll fit on the next meeting, but I'm still very concerned about the BES rate study, especially after comments today by the Water Bureau about them looking at rates. There was some mention by Eric. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I do want to keep that out there, sort of front and center. Where is it? When are we going to find out what's going, how much progress they've made and things like that?
Yes, and I think Eliza, maybe just a quick backwards slide, or Amy, I'm sorry.
It's Amy, and we're actually there. We've slotted it in for the summer, so that probably means the July, August.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty much front and center and expected to come up really soon. So thanks, Tom, for the reminder. All right, well, great seeing, kind of hearing all of you. I wish everyone a great weekend and the next couple weeks, and we'll see you in June.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone. Nice job, Karen. Bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, Karen. Great